How's it going, everybody? So really quickly, this is going to be a pretty fast demo. So the last one I talked a little bit about applying texture. So we started to work through starting to build surface on some of our components. The next thing I want to talk about is actually attaching the components. So now you should all have a very good idea about this, because it's going to be the same idea as or the same concepts of slipping and scoring, right? So just really making sure you're slipping and scoring. But I'm going to show you a few other things to kind of, and I want you to keep those in mind as you're starting to assemble some of your compositions. Okay, so have some of my components here. One thing I want you to notice is, so this component I made just the other day, if I hold it like this, it actually wants to sag. Unless I'm putting this like upright without any pressure on it and it can actually sit like this, I could attach the bottom to something. Now if I wanted to set this on the side and put something on top of it, just know that if I do that, it's going to squish quite a bit. So if that's something that you want and you're looking for aesthetically, you want this kind of squish to happen, this would be the time you'd want to attach it. Now if I want it to stay exactly like this and not bend and squish or move, then I'm going to need to let this set up a little bit more. So I'm going to let that set up just a little bit more. Now this one, on the other hand, has been sitting for a while. It's totally fine to set on the side and actually start to kind of build with if I wanted to. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of decide how I want to put this. I'm going to actually set this thing inside of this cone, so I get this really interesting kind of sense of containment, but also I get this nice little point down here in this round area, so I get this really good, nice contrast in some of the kind of the formal qualities of the work. So I'm going to come back, just add a little bit of slip to my clay surface. And when you guys are attaching, it's really important to remember that the clay needs to be at a similar consistency. It doesn't need to be the exact, like if you think about a handle and or something, like if we were going to attach a handle to a mug, like we still want it, the handle is going to probably be a bit flexible, but it's going to start to be setting up a little bit. So you want them to be close, as close as possible when you're attaching, and the clay consistency. I mean like that. What I mean by that is one's not way too hard or way too soft. Like anything bone dry, if it's bone dry, if it's changing color because it's drying out, the chances of you attaching something still wet and green to it, they won't shrink at the same time, so they're gonna crack. Okay, so it's really important as you're putting stuff together that you're keeping them the same consistency. Usually you're building all of your components around the same time, so they're under plastic and they're drying out at the same time, and that's good. You want that. You want it to be like that. It's going to just be stronger. The clay can shrink together because it's all going to be the same drying at the same time, and that's going to make a stronger piece. So I already kind of prefabbed this up a little bit. I actually kind of went in and kind of slipped and scored this inner part of this. So I'm actually going to attach this. I have made a mark so I can actually see exactly how I wanted it to line up. So it's going to line up nicely in here. Great. So I'm just starting to kind of go around and make sure this is nice, so I get this nice seam. As you're pushing components together, you should notice, like, and you've probably already noticed this a little bit, some of the slip kind of squeezes out a little bit. That's good. That means you're actually getting a bond, you're getting a seal there around the edge. So we're going to let that kind of stay. If you want to clean that up, remember the brush that we talked about, maybe potentially purchasing a brush. Come in with a brush, kind of clean it off a little bit so it's not sopping wet, and then you can kind of come right back around on the inside here and just kind of wipe your brush on the inside, and that's actually going to clean up those areas a little bit. It's all about craftsmanship, right? It's all about a good sense of craftsmanship and not making it look super sloppy. Okay, so now I have this nice connection here. But you can see if you look really closely in there, there's still some spots that are like, it's like this thing isn't coming out, but it just doesn't look as nice. If I wanted to clean that up a little bit, one thing I can do is take a wet piece of clay, roll it out into like a spaghetti, basically rolling out a noodle or a coil, super thin coil. And what I'm doing is basically just rolling this along my hands, just like this, not pressing too hard in one spot, otherwise it'll smush out, but just lightly kind of letting it roll and expand and expand and expand. And what we're going to do is basically we're going to create a super thin coil, snake-like noodle spaghetti kind of deal, and this is going to act like a weld, and we're going to actually tap this around. Okay, so this is going to be really helpful. This isn't necessary, but this will make a, if there's a spot that you're like, I don't know if that's gonna hold, tack a weld like this on there, and it'll be super solid. inside. You can, if you're like in a cube, sometimes up the sides and the seams of a cube, this is really, really helpful. So we're gonna go through and I'm just gonna kind of slightly slip and score this area. This one I'm not gonna spend as much time as I would another seam because I'm gonna actually compress it in. And I'll show you what I mean. So I'm coming back with my pin tool, just kind of roughing up that area. Then I'm gonna take a little bit of water. I'm just gonna run a little bit of water along the edge of this. I'm not even gonna score it. I'm just gonna run a little bit of water along the edge. And then I'm actually gonna push it in there. If you can see, I'm gonna lay this in all the way in and around. I'm just gonna start kind of pushing that in that seam. If it breaks, that's fine. We can kind of come back. We're gonna compress it in anyway. You can even take it and kind of wrap it all the way around. Lay it right down in that seam. This is going to look so much better than the other one. So much more finished, so much more complete, so much more considered. Okay? And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the effort here, right? And one, this is going to make sure that it gets through the process. So the next thing I'm going to do is take, it could be maybe the end of this brush, it could be the end of the tool here, it could be the end of one of these skewers, whatever, and I'm actually going to kind of come in and just kind of compress by pushing in that seam there, and I'm just going to kind of push this down in. What this is doing is setting it down in that seam, really kind of fusing it, marrying it to the form. This is like literally just like welding, right? Maybe you like this texture and you want to leave it. We're gonna have plenty of material now. So this is gonna be kind of a rough start. See that? There we go. Now we're kind of pressed in that seal. Now we can actually come back through and just kind of carve some of it away if we want. Using just the big end of the skewer to just kind of get rid of some of the material. And I could come back with a little bit of water. I'm gonna soften that up a little bit. Next thing I'm going to do is just use a skewer and just same thing, just kind of come through, clean it up. It's still a little wet, might want to let it set up just a little bit more. This is good. Pin tool, where's my, looking for a rib. So now I can come back in with a rib. You can already see it's already looking nicer in there. Then I'm going to come back with this rib and I'm just going to kind of really just kind of clean up around the sides. Any excess material, I'm just kind of scraping it back up onto this round sphere, on the half sphere. You might have to try different things to find whatever works for you. You'll get it eventually, just keep working with it. And I'm working it back into the cone now, just going on the opposite side. There we go. Looks really good. A lot more considered, a lot more refined, just all around better than initially when I first put it in. I could see that the attachment was kind of sloppy, but it was just the angle. It was a hard angle to get to make a nice clean line. So now this kind of looks like almost like it's kind of, it really looks like it belongs with this form. It almost looks like it's growing out. So I'm just kind of putting a little bit of water on my brush, coming back down, putting a light pressure, just kind of cleaning it up. Something I'd want to work on is this edge, kind of really working and refining that edge out, but we're not going to work on that yet right now for the demo at least. There we go. I can come back. Now maybe I want one line that goes all the way around, nice clean line. I'm just going to use the pointy end. That looks pretty nice. Now I've got this nice line, nice clean line. Okay, great. So the next thing I want to do quickly is make sure, so now that we've closed this off, we've actually enclosed a bunch of air in here. We need to make sure that we have some sort of hole, otherwise this piece could potentially blow up because we've trapped a bunch of air in there now. So if you trap air in a cylinder like this, if I were to put at the ends, close the air into this completely, we need to perforate somewhere where the air can kind of escape. A lot of times people will kind of hide it in a spot where maybe you won't see it as often. We could just put a little hole like right here, just a little tiny hole, something like that. Now we have that small hole right there. That's going to let air escape, steam escape once we start to fire it. So that's important to remember. All right, so now maybe something like this. I think I'm going to just kind of attach this right here. So now I'm going to come back, lay this on, mark out. I like the way this looks, kind of just balancing and resting on this. I'm going to mark both. I'm going to mark on the cone and also where I want to put it. So I can see from here to here, that's kind of where my attachment's going to go, but I also marked on this, on my cylinder as well. Slip and score, put a little bit of slip down. You'll notice you might need to use a little bit more slip. The drier the form is getting, you really want to make sure you're creating that glue. If it's dry and you put just a little bit of slip or something, it might not hold. It might break. So I'm gonna put a little bit more slip. Come back in, really kind of sketch this up pretty good. On here and glue it down. So now if I were to do this, this thing's going to want to move on me. So now I'm going to have to start thinking about my design. And maybe now is the time to use a spare piece to kind of let this kind of like lean back or something. I know I'm going to need something on the side because this thing wants to rock anyway. So I was thinking about putting another component, another clay component, potentially something like this. But here we go. This is, see how I just kind of did that. Now it's actually holding it up. Actually, visually, I kind of like this. Now, if I were to rock that up, leave that like that, maybe potentially something like this could kind of sneak in here, like this or like this. Anyway, for now, I'm just going to let that set up. I'm going to let these two objects kind of marry up together. I really like what's going on here. So I'm going to let this kind of sit. I'm going to cover it back up. Maybe work some other components. You want to let it. Once you make some attachments, it's best to just kind of let them sit and marry up a little bit too as well. Okay, that's all I wanted to show you, and get to it. Thanks.